Neal is going to do his review of the Rogue Prince of Persia, which is the latest Prince of Persia video game. Neal, let us know all about it.
All right, so it's been a hot minute since the last big Prince of Persia games from Ubisoft. Last year we had Prince of Persia and the Lost Crown, which was a Metroidvania game. But now this year, after several months of early access, we have this game, the Rogue Prince of Persia, which takes the 2D gameplay of the old school Prince of Persia games and merges it with a roguelike system akin to something you would see in Hades or Enter the Gungeon and things of that nature. This game was developed by Evil Empire, who are the developers responsible for the Dead Cells DLC. So not the main game, but all the added expansions and stuff like that that came out after that game was initially released. So it finally released on August 20th, and this is a very good roguelike game. The main thing that separates this game in particular from stuff like Hades or Dead Cells or Risk of Rain or stuff like that is the 2D parkour mechanic. As you can see from the gameplay, this is a 2D action game, but it takes the parkour elements that we're seeing in later Prince of Persia games like the Sands of Time and just effortlessly merges it with the 2D gameplay. So you have a brisk, quick, and really exciting gameplay loop that involves you running up walls, doing death-defying stunts, and just accumulating power and magic over the course of all your runs. The main story of this game involves the Prince of Persia, and he is involved. A warring country invades his kingdom, and the leader ends up killing him. He is, however, saved from death because you find out that he has an amulet that essentially resets time every time he falls asleep. So he dies at the hands of this Hun emperor, but then wakes up to realize, oh man, this is only a couple days until he arrives, so I gotta prepare and figure out what's going on. What makes this game interesting is, like I said, the parkour mechanics, but also how the story develops. Because when you go on your runs, you can essentially do a level select within the run by finding different exits, and depending on the exits you take and what levels you enter, the story will play out differently. And to reach the end of the game, you have to complete 3 story objectives and then defeat the final boss. So, just as an example, your first story objective, you'll find out that your brother's been captured. And then once you find your brother in a different level, he'll say, oh, there's this evil energy keeping me from escaping. But then you realize, oh, wait, if I get the water flowing from this level from earlier, I can free him. So you got to figure out how to do that. And what makes it, and it's this marriage of the 2D parkour gameplay and the roguelike elements that make Rogue Prince of Persia a really standout and really interesting game in its own right.
Nice. Okay. And I saw this was available. Like if you have the PlayStation Plus extra there, you can also get this there, which is kind of like the Game Pass there, so you don't have to pay for it directly. You can get it there as well.
Correct. That's how I actually played it. It's just through the PlayStation Plus subscription. But if you don't have it, I think it's $30.
Okay. You think it's worth $30? You think it's enough game for $30?
I think so. I think there's a very good, bang for your buck in terms of the value, and it's just a very good game on its own right. But what were you going to say?
Also the difficulty of the game. Where's that at? Where's the accessibility there with it?
Okay, so there are no difficulty options, but it's really not that hard of a game. I mean, like any of these roguelike games, the hardest part is at the beginning because you're trying to figure out the mechanics and how the gameplay systems all fit together. But once you really figure out how everything works, it's really not that hard. It's definitely easier than something like Enter the Gungeon was, or even parts of Hades were if you didn't use that, the Deus mode from that game. But I definitely think this is one of the more approachable roguelike games. So if you're new to the genre, I think this would be a very good entry point. Um, but yeah, like I was saying, as you play through the game, you'll collect power ups to like amplify your base move kit. So like just as an example, you'll start every run and have to choose your weapon and your secondary weapon, and then along the way you'll pick up medallions that give you extra power, like every time you kick an enemy, it'll poison a nearby group or stuff like that. If I do have to label one criticism against this game is that I don't after a while the runs stop being unique because the powers just don't really fundamentally transform how the prince interacts with the world. You compare it to something like Hades, where depending on the god powers you get, the Ares powers in that game and the Athena powers and the Poseidon powers all play vastly differently in Hades. Whereas in this one, you're just kind of adding bonus effects to the base kit you're already running. So, unfortunately, I think by the time the credits roll, I don't really think there's a lot of replay value to this because there's not enough transformative elements to make the runs and the gameplay loop really vastly different over time.
Okay. And you mentioned like since there's no real difficulty there, I know some players like to maybe go back, play a game on a harder difficulty, to maybe have more challenge there. So you said you can't really do that with this game like this. Um,
I you to a certain extent you can because like once you complete a run, you unlock the ability to give yourself difficulty modifiers. Like you can add a
okay.
difficulty modifier that says like, oh, enemies have a 50% chance more to have a shield because that there's a mechanic in the game where some big enemies will have shields and you gotta kick other enemies or objects to like disrupt it and stuff like that. You can add difficulty modifiers in that way to make the game artificially more challenging, but there's not a easy, normal, or hard mode in the difficulty settings or anything like that.
Okay. All right. And then the length of the game. I'm seeing here it's 8 hours. Is that how long you played it for?
I took a little longer than that. I think if I had to guess, I would say between 12 and 15 hours is the amount of time it would take for you to start to roll credits. I mean, you can play for hours and hours more with the difficulty modifiers as you see fit. But if you're like me and just more like a story gamer, I think that 12 to 15 hours is what you'll spend on it.
Okay. So you didn't do any like some of the extra stuff. You just main story, that was it. About you say
Uh,
about 12 hours.
Yeah, I mean, you end up doing some extra stuff along the way. Like you can unlock costumes, and there's some combat challenges you can do where like defeat 15 archers or defeat this particular boss in this particular way, and you'll get rewarded for it. So you kind of do those things along the way. So it's not like if you were just like really not focusing on any of that kind of stuff, you could probably beat it in 10 hours. But the 12 to 15 hours is me A doing the story and B just doing side stuff along the way, like unlocking costumes and doing the combat challenges. And and just seeing the different routes that the you can exit the levels, because there's a couple interesting ways you can exit the levels that aren't immediately obvious that you have to look for.
Mm. And you said you played on the PlayStation Plus extra there, so you played it on PlayStation. How was that experience playing it on the console? How was that?
Um, I thought it played really well. The controls were really smooth and it felt very responsive. And it always felt like if I made a mistake, that's because I messed up. It never felt cheap or unwarranted or anything like that. The one issue I would have is for some weird reason the loading times are noticeably long, which is kind of I don't want to say unacceptable, but like kind of bizarre in a game of this style where we're on the PlayStation 5 era and a 2D like Hades type game is like taking upwards of like 20 to 30 seconds to load a level. It's a little odd and a little on the long side. It doesn't really help in particular because I just played Death Stranding 2, which you load up that game and it loads up on this huge open world basically instantaneously. So it is, there are a couple of technical hiccups because there's some slowdown, particularly in the load times and in some of the menu navigation, but it really wasn't like that bad. It was just kind of noticeable and kind of weird because I thought we were kind of past this kind of stuff, especially in these like, not to say this was an easy game to make, but comparatively easier game to load up compared to stuff like Death Stranding 2 or God of War, any of those kind of things.
Yeah. And recently, we've had a string of 2D games came out. I don't know if you've dabbled or played in these ones, but Shinobi came out, Art of Vengeance, and then we also had Ninja Gaiden, Ragebound. This didn't come out recently, but I know you mentioned Hades there. Have you played some of those games there, like Hades or Shibonen
Or
or Ninja? What
Shinobi.
Shinobi? Sorry, yeah, Shinobi, and then what did I just say? Ragebound, Ninja Gaiden,
Yeah.
Ragebound. Have you played some of those?
Okay, so I have not played Ragebound. I absolutely adore Hades. It's one of the best indie games I've ever played, and I have only played the demo of Shinobi, and Shinobi is great. The combat system in Shinobi is borderline perfect for the kind of game it is, and it's the same developers of Street of Rage 4, which came out a couple years ago, and that game also had an amazing combat system. So I'm not entirely surprised to see that Shinobi kind of takes the best elements from that. Comparatively speaking, Rogue Prince of Persia, its combat system is really good and enjoyable, but it's not like on the level of Hades or Shinobi or anything like that because one, Hades had the benefit of totally transforming itself depending on the power kind of powers you get, whereas Prince of Persia more relies on the acrobatics and just the death-defying stunts to really add its gameplay flavor. And Shinobi just has the challenge of, just really hunkering down and learning enemy patterns and stuff like that. There is some of that in Rogue Prince of Persia, but it's not as pronounced. And, like the other older Prince of Persia games like Sands of Time, Warrior Within, and Two Thrones, it just really relies on the acrobatics and the wall running and the platforming to really give the gameplay its flavor. And I'm a big Prince of Persia fan. The games I list are some of my favorite games of all time. So I was more than happy to indulge in that for the entire run.
So, what will be your rating?
It would be a peak gaming. This is not the absolute best roguelike game I've ever played, but I think this is still a great one. It's a really good it's a really good starting game for people who are new to the genre. And I think if you're looking for something that really is unique within the roguelike genre and just plays like a Prince of Persia game, it does what it sets out to do really well. Not the absolute best game in this genre, but still a great one. So peak gaming.
All right. So a peek from Neal for the Rogue of Prince of Persia. Like I said, $30 if you want to pay it. But if you have something like Game Pass, like the PlayStation Plus extra there, you can play it there for free, I guess, basically. And you said that's where you played, and that's where you enjoyed it. But hey, if you think this looks interesting, the $30, pink, that's probably worth it if you want to spend that little $30 there.
Yes,
Um,
I would highly recommend it to people. Maybe try it out first just to see if you like it or not, but I highly recommend it.